Chapter 6. A hygienic and natural method of birth control. As prostitution led to venereal diseases, so contraception, and other artificial methods of birth control, are leading to neurasthenia and cancer of the womb. Birth control has made prostitution an almost universal practice, in and out of marriage. Mr. Thurston says, I am impelled to the following conclusions. 1. That nature never intended a woman to be bound to a man for life. To be compelled to occupy the same bed or habitation with him, night after night, in pregnancy and out, in order to earn her board and lodging, and to exercise her natural right to bear children. 2. That the daily and nightly juxtaposition of the male and female, which is a result of present marriage laws and customs, leads to unrestrained sexual intercourse, which perverts the natural instincts of both male and female, and makes partial prostitutes of 90% of all married women. This condition arises from the fact that married women have been led to believe that such prostitution of themselves is right and natural, because it is legal, and that it is necessary in order to retain the affections of their husbands. Continual, unrestrained sexual intercourse causes the woman to become highly nervous, prematurely aged, diseased, irritable, restless, discontented, and incapable of properly caring for such children as she may bear. Among the poorer classes, it leads to the propagation of many children who are not wanted, and who cannot be cared for properly when they arrive. Neglect of the children leads to disease, and makes sex perverts, degenerates, and criminals. While we maintain that contraception, as well as all other artificial methods of birth control, is unscientific, unhygienic and injurious, both to the individual and to the race, we are not in favor of uncontrolled and promiscuous breeding, nor of the conception and birth of unwanted children. We agree with the birth controller that the qualitative improvement of humanity is far more important than its quantitative multiplication, and that a few superior human types are much preferable to a multitude of inferior ones. But we disagree as to methods. We maintain that a more healthful, certain, and scientific method of birth control exists. Among preventive methods which require no artificial devices, one has been proposed based upon the fact that the womb is ordinarily barren from the 17th till the 22nd day following the commencement of each menstrual flow. However, this method is unreliable, for it has been proven that spermatozoa may live for 6 to 10 days after they are deposited, and that conception may occur on any day of the intermenstrual period. The most scientific method of birth control consists in first giving the intestinal tract a thorough cleansing through a natural diet composed of raw vegetables, fruits, and nuts. Most sex desire is not natural, but is due to unhealthful and stimulating food and drink. This is very evident in the case of alcohol. It is also so in the case of meat. The early Christians, the Essenes, who led chaste lives, were forbidden the use of wine and animal foods. Tolstoy, who was opposed to artificial methods of birth control, as was Malthus, claimed that the natural method, namely continence, would be possible if people would use no alcohol or meat, eat with great moderation, and not be afraid of hard work. Dr. Kish advises unmarried women who desire to reduce excessive sexual desire, to abstain from alcoholics, meat and other stimulating foods. Vegetarians are generally more continent than meat-eaters. Pythagoras, Plato, Aristotle, Jesus, John the Baptist, Apollonius of Tyana, Saint Catherine of Siena, and Leonardo da Vinci were vegetarians who led strictly chaste lives. The vegetarian diet does not reduce erotic desire by any weakening effect, rather, it gives one increased vitality, and removes irritating toxins from the blood, which have been arousing morbid sexual craving by their action upon the internal sex organs. The gynecologist, Bebel, who is absolutely against artificial birth control, claims that desired results may be obtained in a much more healthful way by regulating the diet. He refers to the example of the bees, which, by a change of nutrition, can produce a new queen bee at will. He says, there can be no doubt whatever that the mode of nutrition has an influence on the composition of the male semen, and also on the susceptibility to fertilization of the female ovum. Hence the increase in population must to a very important extent depend on the mode of nutrition. If this could be definitely established, we should have, in the supply of nutriment, a means of regulating the population. One has only to try the experiment of changing from a meat diet to a vegetarian one to notice a great transformation in the character of the sexual impulse. This purification of the blood brings the reproductive organs from a prolapsed, overheated, morbidly irritable condition to a healthful and firm state, as they are among animals. The removal of an internal pressure upon the seminal vesicles, or the uterus, produced by a distended colon filled with rotting feces, as results from a meat diet, does away with the pathological centralization of erotic feeling in the genital region, an abnormality which is almost universal, thus preventing erections, which only occur in an unhealthy organism. The sex impulse, which was previously perverted by chronic ill health, now becomes healthy and normal. Then it finds no need for the use of artificial methods of birth control. To the healthy sexual instinct, these are disgusting. The female genital organs, after the attainment of maturity, cannot be healthy unless they are fulfilling their natural function, reproduction. If this impulse is repressed, as occurs when birth control methods are used, the female organs become chronically irritated and inflamed. The persistent urge for reproduction finds expression in a regressed form as the desire for sexual intercourse. The reproductive impulse is the driving force behind a woman's existence. When this becomes perverted, she becomes a fiend. Euripides said, "There is nothing worse than a bad woman, and nothing better than a good one." When the possibility of reproduction is thwarted, the sexual act, to the female, becomes a narcotic, by which she can temporarily relieve the morbid irritability from which she suffers to the detriment of both herself and the male. He who made her his sexual slave, now suffers the consequences. He becomes the victim of a vampire who sucks out his life blood. There is one remedy for this condition, the adoption of a natural diet and the fulfillment of the reproductive impulse. The male and the female are physiologically and psychologically complementary. Organs, nerve centers, and ductless glands, which are most active in one, are passive in the other. Each functions in a different nervous system, the male, in the central, and the female, in the sympathetic. The human body is surrounded by a field of electromagnetism, generated by electrical currents in the nerves, the radiations of the central nervous system of the male being positive and electrical in character, and those of the sympathetic nervous system of the female being negative and magnetic. The attraction between the sexes is due to an unconscious urge to unite these complementary electromagnetic radiations. This union of soul magnetisms, which may occur without physical contact, as during social dancing, is the source of joy, inspiration and invigoration resulting from the chaste association of the sexes. However, this must be differentiated from the sensations of morbid pleasure accompanying seminal emissions. The orgasm during intercourse, the former is rejuvenating and life-giving, the latter is deadening and devitalizing. The one is healthy, the other is pathological. The belief that the insertion of the penis into the vagina, followed by onanistic friction and by the discharge of seminal fluid is divinely ordained as the only normal fulfillment of the sex impulse, a falsity which has been impressed upon us during early childhood by the bad example of our parents, and by the instructions we have received from companions of the street and school, is a superstition which has wrought havoc with mankind. No healthy, undomesticated animal engages in such perverse activity, for, as will be shown later, the reproductive act, among healthy animals, is of a very different nature. Contraception. Contrary to the opinions of would-be eugenists, leads to an inferior race. Such knowledge is more accessible to the educated than to the illiterate classes. Also, all who thus misuse their reproductive organs become incapable of ever giving birth to normal children. Their future progeny, if they have any, will be diseased and feeble-minded, unless they revitalize themselves, previous to conception, by hygienic and continent living. Contraceptive. Addicts destroy their own, as well as their future children's health. While in the animal, sex has only one expression, procreation, in man it has another, a psychological and social one. The great error of the human race has been to seek the fulfillment of the latter purpose through means designed for the accomplishment of the former. The sex organs have two normal functions: reproduction and internal secretion. A healthy organism will use them in no other way. An unhealthy one, however, whose sex organs are irritated by toxins in the blood, produced by alcohol, meat or tobacco, will seek to remove this irritation by friction, followed by a seminal discharge. Such an act, whether the hand or an organ of the opposite sex is used for the purpose, is masturbation pure and simple. Sexual intercourse is therefore a vicarious form of masturbation. One who acquires true physiological health through a natural diet has no such perverse desires. Every natural impulse is good, for it has an organic function to perform. It is only the perversion of the natural impulse which is evil. The original function of the sense of taste, which was to select physiologically beneficial nutriment, has in most people been lost. The tongue has been made into an organ of pleasure, to the detriment of the organism. In a similar manner, the reproductive instinct has been perverted. And it was the perversion of the nutritive instinct, as is evident by the domestication and artificial feeding of animals, that led to the perversion of the sexual instinct. Therefore, by regaining our natural nutritive instinct, we will thereby regain our natural sexual instinct. Since the sex relationship is a blending of magnetisms, there is no reason why the reproductive organs need to have any part of it. Magnetic vitality is not centered in the pelvic region but pervades the entire organism, being especially strong around the head. A hygienic diet will remove the internal irritation which causes a desire to masturbate while in soul union with one we love. This is the only healthy and natural method of birth control. Vegetarians desire no other one. Since it involves a conservation of vital fluid by both parties, it is rejuvenating, healing, and strengthening, instead of devitalizing. However, this magnetic relationship should not be engaged in too frequently or promiscuously. It should not be indulged in during the year previous to conception. It is only recommended to those who might otherwise destroy themselves by more harmful practices, even as dairy products are recommended to those who are changing from a meat to a vegetarian diet. The sex organs have two normal functions, procreation and internal secretion. Any other use of them is a perversion which must lead to pathological consequences. This is the opinion of the great gynecologist, Hagar, who says, gratification of the sexual impulse gives rise in women to the formation and growth of tumors, cause numerous mechanical disturbances, and opens the way to infection. The numerous and various disasters which are brought upon the world by unbridled and unregulated sexual passion can be prevented only by enlightenment, moderation, and continence. Magnetic interchange, in which the reproductive organs have no part, in which no masturbation occurs, is the most rational method of birth control. Those who imagine that such a sex life is too idealistic or platonic for them have only to stop drinking and smoking, and to cleanse their digestive tract through a vegetarian diet, to find out that it is not, that, instead, it is the only healthy and natural expression of the sex impulse, of which the other is a pathological perversion. Localization of erotic feeling in the genital region is due to the irritation and stimulation produced by meat, fish, eggs, coffee, tea, alcohol, and tobacco. When the blood is purified, such morbid sensations and desires cease. The reproductive organs are then used only for their natural purpose, procreation. The chaste happiness attending the blending of soul magnetisms replaces the perverse pleasure of seminal emissions. Those who substitute this chaste sexual relationship for the old, devitalizing, pathogenic sexual intercourse will discover its great superiority. One leads to increased health, the other leads to disease. One results in happiness, peace, and satisfaction. The other produces only a morbid irritability, a pathological craving which increases with its gratification. One leads to longevity, the other, to premature senility and death. One recharges, heals, and rejuvenates the body, the other weakens and destroys it. One makes marriage a perpetual courtship, the other to degeneracy.